Okay. Hello, everyone. I think we're live. And this is our London Q&A, living and studying in London. We're here with Kasia, Sophie. My name is Hannah. And we'll just introduce ourselves real quick, that you know where we studied and where we're from. Kasia, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Kasia, I'm from Poland, and I've done my undergraduate degree in anthropology over at LSE, and at the moment I'm doing my master's at the University of Cambridge.
Sophie?
My name is Sophie. So I'm from Austria, but I did my undergrad Masters of Engineering in Biochemical Engineering at the University College London, and I spent a year abroad, and I just came back 2 weeks ago in Toronto.
And my name is Hannah. I am also from Austria, and I am just finishing my undergraduate in European Studies and Spanish at King's College London. And I spent a year in Spain, and now at Project Access, I'm taking care of all the content, organizing webinars and those things. Now, just for the kind of organizational stuff, if you have any further questions than the ones that you've sent us before and that we will be answering, you can message us on our Facebook page or leave them in the comment section on YouTube, and we'll try to respond to those as well. But we've had a lot of questions before that we've kind of put into 3 categories. The first one that we'll be starting with is everything about living in London, costs, how things work when you arrive. And the second one will be about accommodation, different types of halls, where to live, location, cost. And the third part is about social life at university and settling in. And at the end, we'll hopefully have some time for other questions. So I suggest we start with the first one, which is living in London. And the biggest concern is obviously cost. Maybe Kasia, could you give us your experience?
Well, it really depends how much you spend. It's very personal, and you can save up more once you get there. You will probably find yourself spending more at the start because, first of all, you have to buy new amenities, different things. Secondly, because you don't really know how to budget that well. But you would expect in the long run to spend about £1,000 a month in London. That's what's usually accepted, since you would probably have to think about at least 500, 600 for accommodation. Also, again, but we'll get to more details in the accommodation section. It really depends where you will live, but also transport and food. It very much depends on your social life. If you decide to go out every weekend, you can expect to spend much more than £1,000 a month. So it really depends. But however, I managed to usually spend less. I would spend about 700-800, but I would usually live quite far off. So I would never spend more than 500 on accommodation. And also I just simply wouldn't go out much and always try to cook my food and take it over. So it very much depends, but in order to be comfortable, I would definitely sort of try and budget for this 1,000 a month. That's usually what universities on the websites give as a kind of indicator of being prepared to actually live in London.
Good, and we have Hannah from Austria asking where to get deals for food, how you can save money on that, if it's easier to go for catered halls, for example.
Yes, so it's definitely cheaper to cook yourself, and LSE, because I see that Hannah's going to LSE, has microwave facilities over, so you can bring your food and microwave it over at LSE. It's not a big problem. Unfortunately, the restaurants over at LSE are not that cheap. If I compare it to Cambridge right now, for example, it's very cheap to actually dine on campus. Not so much at LSE. However, you can cook for yourself. Also, some of the halls have catering included in the evening, so that would go into your rent, and that makes it cheaper as well. Another thing that LSE has is Hare Krishna. If it's free food, free lunch practically every day. Of course, it's quite repetitive and just rice with some vegetables. But if you like that kind of food, you might not want to eat it every day, but you can save quite a lot of money on that as well. A cheap bar at LSE is Wright's, where you can get cheapest coffee and things like that. And if you drink a lot of coffee, you will find that actually buying filter coffees instead of Americanos in the long run can save you up for an extra drink at the end of the week. So there are different strategies that you can employ. And as I said before, it might be a bit more difficult at the start. So you might find yourself dining more expensively at the beginning, since you don't know the deals, you don't know, you haven't really gotten used to certain habits of maybe cooking and packing your own food. But you will definitely find your place around quite soon.
Okay, good. But maybe, Sophie, we have someone from King's asking about budgeting in general. How does it work to kind of get settled in the UK, moving to London? What's your experience in that?
So what I would recommend is one of the first things you should do when you arrive in London, especially if you're not from the UK, you should open a UK bank account to sort all your finances out. This is usually pretty simple. You should never have to pay any fees. Every major bank pretty much has an option for students where they give you free accounts, and they also have different perks. So just have a look around and see what kind of perk is good for your lifestyle. So for example, Santander offers one where you get a free rail card. So with the rail card, it's quite useful for London because if you link it with your Oyster, then you get, I think it's a third off the tube fare in off-peak times. And obviously, any rail travel across the UK is a lot cheaper as well. If you go with Metro, then if you travel a lot in Europe, that might be quite useful because they don't charge you any conversion fees or fees if you decide to take out money at any European destination. Other than that, yeah, you should arrange for all the money that you have, like all your income, to feed into that bank account, and then it's usually quite it'll be straightforward to use it. And personally, what I found easy to do is basically I pay everything with debit card, and I also only have a single account, which just makes it less confusing. It's annoying if you lose the card because then it's then you kind of have no money for a while. But otherwise, it's a pretty good strategy if you want everything in one place. And it means that basically my debit card statement is essentially all the money that I spend, and it's pretty easy at the end of the month. I can just go online and see where my money went, basically. So I usually do that at the end of the month, and I see, like, where did all my money go? What did I do this month? And then you can identify easy ways to save. And it's pretty good. It's pretty good for self-reflection of where everything goes, because it's kind of annoying to write down, even if it's on your phone or in a notebook, every time you buy a coffee or you buy lunch or you do a grocery shop. It's all those little things that start to add up. So that's what I found pretty easy and what I would recommend.
Yeah.
In terms of spending, so I see that Olivia, she asked how much money should you initially bring to uni to settle in. So it kind of depends what you need in the first few days. So if you're coming from abroad, this might be a little bit more. If you're local to the UK, this might be a little bit less. It also depends on your accommodation situation, how much is provided there and how much you need to bring in terms of amenities, what you want to do during Freshers Week and how quickly you can get set up. So setting up a UK bank account is usually pretty quick. You can do it within a day for sure. And then you can arrange an international transfer to come in and you'll have money in your bank bank account pretty quickly. It shouldn't really take more than 2 days. And once that's done, then you don't need any more kind of like converted money from wherever you're coming from. So I would just think about what are the kind of expenses that you'll have immediately when you come. Do you need to pay rent, or is it all sorted? Do you need to buy any furniture, or do you just need like some money for daily expenses for the first few days until you get settled? So in my opinion, and obviously take maybe a few £100 if as a ballpark figure, as kind of like an emergency fund, but look to get settled with the bank account pretty soon, and that should be okay.
Yeah, I think what you need is a letter that confirms where you live. You can get that from your university. You can get kind of a confirmation of study letter. Just go there when you're kind of immatriculated. Say, I need this for my bank account. They'll know what you mean. And a form of ID. And then, as Sophie said, it's pretty easy. And also in the UK, if you're coming from somewhere else, in London especially, everyone pays with card all the time, even if it's just a chewing gum. So it's not unusual to just pay your coffee with card. That's quite common.
One more thing in terms of opening a bank account, if you're not going to be in college accommodation, some banks would require certain bills from you. If you do not have a college accommodation kind of statement, because it's a bit different. So I, for example, did not have that, and I went to a few banks and I could only open up a bank account at Lloyd's because it was the only bank that didn't ask for that. So there always will be an option. However, there may be some complications depending on your personal situation. However, if most of you are going to stay in university accommodation for the first year, settling in is usually much easier because banks are used to that. Also, you would not have to worry about council tax. When you do go and live privately, you do have to get a council tax exemption form from your university in order not to pay those extra fees. However, yeah, apart from that, it's very easy.
Good. The next question.
So we have a question from Saima from the UK, who's going to UCL, how to budget and what information you need to apply for student finance and scholarships. So in terms of student finance, all UK and European students are eligible for a tuition fee loan, which usually is £9,000 a year. And you're also eligible for a maintenance loan, which I think in London is around 4,500. So that's the amount that you can get for sure.
Are you sure that I've never got maintenance allowance. I think
Yeah, for EU it's just tuition.
Just tuition.
Oh, I see. Okay. So I guess for UK students, you can get also a maintenance loan if you want. And then any means tested amount above that, so there's grants and bursaries available if you decide to declare your household income. And but everyone is eligible. I should say EU citizens are eligible for the tuition fee loan. And the first time you do it, it's a slightly longer process. So you have to apply via the student finance website. I think it's the UK government website, and everything is on there. I think the deadline is the end of May for first-time applicants. They will ask you for a bunch of documents. They might ask you to send in your passport. So you have to kind of think about your timing, when you go traveling and when you'll need some of those documents, or look if they accept another form of ID, which is also possible. In terms of scholarships, there's always lots available. Some of them are based on academic merit. There's a bunch of entrance scholarships, so check the uni you're going to. They will usually have a part of their website will be dedicated to finance, and they will list all the scholarships that they give out. Some of them you'll qualify for automatically, and some of them you'll have to actually apply. So just have a look around and apply to as many as you can, basically. And there's a bunch of websites that summarize quite well what kind of scholarships are available to what students. So some of them have quite specific criteria in terms of what nationality you're from or kind of your background and things like that. And then, but there's good websites available that list them nicely, and then you can just have a look through and see which ones match your profile and which ones you can apply for, and do it that way.
Okay, I think that's move on to the next questions, which one of them is how can I save money during my stay, the general. So I'll just sum up what we said and add a few things. So accommodation is the biggest part, which we'll come to in the second part. And as we said, food and drink, whether you cook yourself or go to eat out, is a big part as well. And the third that we haven't mentioned that much is travel, because tube tickets are really expensive. There are a few things. Either you could get a bike if you're really adventurous and safe.
Confident, yes.
Confident. I'm going to be honest, it's not easy. I have a bike and I'm cycling. It can be very scary, but it's also a lot cheaper than getting a monthly pass. Second, what we already mentioned, get a rail card and put it onto your Oyster card. If you're a student, you can also order a student Oyster card, which gives you 30% off your monthly or weekly ticket. If you live close and don't want to kind of get a monthly pass, make sure you put your rail card onto that Oyster card. You just go to the tube stop and ask someone if they can apply that. So you get 30% off all your non-peak travels, which really pays off. And then we have a question from Megan from Bermuda, who's going to King's, asking, where can I get cheap textbooks? So there are several ways you can look for them. First, have a look whether you really need them, because sometimes at the beginning of the course they tell you need all these books, and actually you just need a few chapters that you can read at the library or get from somewhere else. Then you can also join Facebook groups of people above you who might want to sell their books for cheaper, which is a good way to get secondhand books. And then there are websites dedicated to selling and buying those. And also, for example, at LSE, there's a Alpha Books, a secondhand bookshop, where you can have a look. Make sure you go before everyone else on your course goes. So if you're early enough, you should get a copy if you really need one.
Yeah, to that, I also add the different libraries. So for example, Senate House has a much longer loan period than LSE. And I often found that a book that, for example, everyone on my course at LSE would need will be taken out of the library all the time. And nobody thinks of actually going to a Senate House. So at the start of the year, if you live in London, I would suggest, also because it's a very nice place to study, for you to get a Senate House library card, and then also see whether you can get out some of your books from there, because you can keep them for longer than most universities, and then you might not need to buy a book. Also, Amazon has second-hand listings. So when you go on Amazon and you click used books, you can get some books very, very cheaply, for even £2-3. So you can have all those different strategies. And as Hannah said, it's always good to kind of contact people above you. And if you don't feel very confident, let's say, with posting on their Facebook group, you might want to ask a friend that's a year above. Do they know somebody? And actually, just from experience, usually you even get an email like that, because as students finishing their course, you do want to sell your books. So you actually might be, actively sought out as a book buyer.
Yes. And regarding libraries, apart from using Senate House, which is the central library, you can also use any of the other University of London libraries. That means, for example, King's, UCL, LSE, you can get a reader's pass. You can't take out any books, but you can go there and read any books you need, which also might be have better availability because not everyone's doing the same course at the same time. So there's also a hot tip on books. Then next question is about part-time work. What is suitable part-time work in London? From Leonardo from Singapore, who's going to LSE. First, I think degrees are quite rigorous, so you shouldn't kind of take up too much before you know how your workload is, how much you will be able to manage while studying. There's some jobs that are better suited to student life. So, for example, universities have roles available as student helpers in university bars. For example, helping out at events, at public events, which is nice because you also get to see the speakers and help the guests before and make sure everything's sorted. So those are kind of the flexible jobs that many students do. You can also, there are kind of organizations that need waiters for events, which is popular because it's very flexible. You could do tutoring, but those are all things that you'll be contacted about or that you read in Facebook groups. Another thing obviously you could do is something that is remote and flexible, translating or web design. But I think that's depends on you. And I would try to start to get to know the university before you look for a job. Yeah,
I think you said basically everything. Do check the job offers that at your university website from time to time. Every single job that I've done throughout my undergraduate degree, I found through the university website. And even when you're not looking for a job at the moment, actually, in terms of some of the flexible positions, it's still good to kind of check the advertising because you might want to find a tutoring position or something like that you might want to start and maybe do a little bit of work and then more when you have more time, depending on the conditions. And most of those student jobs, they're kind of aware that you're a student, so you might have less time. For example, I worked at a school as a teacher assistant, and I found a job through the university website, was advertised on it. But for example, when exams came at the end of the year, I was able to quit the job without many problems. I wasn't bound by any contracts of having to let them know much earlier. So do also, before you take a job, make sure you know what the conditions are, how much you're really required to work and not. And as Hannah said, probably the kind of flexible university jobs are the best. I worked at LSE also as a kind of student helper at different events like open days or tours. I was giving university tours to prospective students. It's a great job because you basically are flooded with different offers that just come to your mailbox as a student helper, but you don't have to accept any of them. So if you don't have a time in a particular week because you have some essays due or you're studying for exams, you don't have to work at all. So those are definitely the best kind of jobs you want to look out for as a student.
Yeah, so that's on jobs. Then something else that came up in your questions was kind of settling in and any concerns you have. And I think it's really important that we just spend a short few minutes on explaining kind of the support structure that the London universities have and how it does work to kind of make sure you can take advantage of them or that you can like ask for help, because I think that's the most important lesson that I learned when I came to London, is that there's always someone you can ask for help. You know, you shouldn't be scared because the university knows that students are coming from all over the world, from all over the UK, might not be familiar with London, so just ask. The first question is how to find doctors, how to register, how does the NHS work? So as a student, you can sign up for a GP, a general practitioner, which is a doctor. There's several centres in London. Also, each university has one. You can sign up. They are more familiar with the students, so might be quite convenient to sign up to those. Then you'll get a number, but your GP will have register all your details, and make sure you bring, for example, your vaccinations that you've done at home. If you're planning on kind of getting something there. If you have any health conditions, make sure they're aware of that, and then they'll support you. You can just call them for an appointment or even make one online, and it's free because it's funded nationally. They also offer other services like health checks that you might want to take advantage of while you're there. Then in the kind of, so yeah, for medical service, just make sure you sign up with a GP so you're registered somewhere. And then the second thing is kind of the university help, the general help. If you're not from the UK and not familiar with or haven't written academic essays in English, there's, for example, kind of a service that helps you write academic essays. They do workshops at the beginning, make sure that you know what it's about. Usually your department will also organize something if you're in the first year. Then the university union, they will also have a support structure with different services that you can find on the website. Informally, it's great if you join any societies because you'll meet many people who going through the same thing, might have the same questions, and it's easier to help. And on the academic side, you will have a personal tutor who you can ask everything, and any academic problems, maybe Kasia, if you can jump in on that.
Yeah, so basically I just want to say that exactly, don't be ashamed to ask for help, even if you're not feeling very comfortable with the workload, you have some personal problems going on, you don't know how to balance maybe certain family obligations with university life, with anything. Do seek help. If you're kind of ashamed to talk to maybe your academic tutor, because suppose your academic tutor, don't think that they kind of are not responsible for your well-being, but also usually are very helpful and willing to listen to you. So especially if you sense that you get along with them, I would not be ashamed of going to them when you have a problem, because they can also point you to some different directions and maybe become more lenient on certain deadlines and things with you. And also in terms of already more formally, each university will usually have disability services who have quite a broad definition of disability. So again, any kind of stress, anxiety problems you may experience, go and talk to them, because they can help you get extensions, special exam conditions, which I can say from personal experience are very, very helpful. For example, I had an hour extra on basically all my examinations, and I could go out and stretch without with the time being stopped. I think during 10 minutes throughout the exam or something like that, because most of the time exams can be very intense. So for example, if you want to go to the bathroom, you can, of course, but your time will keep running. So for people that might have problems with experiencing such conditions, like I must say I absolutely hate exams. For example, I decided I'm going to do a master that's only essay based and dissertation based, precisely because of that. Partially, they do offer different kinds of help. So any kind of problems you may experience throughout your whole degree. There are, as Hannah said, also there's a student union. They would usually have a kind of a separate, more autonomous from the university help structure. And then there's, for example, disability office that, let's say, maybe is more formal, more linked to the university, but also will have more actual administrative power to help you out with things. So definitely at the start of the year, maybe get a kind of an overview what's there on offer. For example, the first 2 years, I didn't make use of those services at all. And only in the last year that I realized that, hey, I'm very stressed during exams, and I might want to try and do something about that to kind of help me relax a bit. So definitely don't feel ashamed, because it's normal and lots of people been through that before. So just remember that always, and see what kind of services are there for you.
Yeah. So, the universities want to help you, and there's no point in feeling ashamed of feeling that you're not good enough because you might need a bit more time or something's happened. That's fine, and that won't influence your grade. So it's all anonymous. No worries about that. You should make sure that you feel like you can do the best. And that's exactly what those services are for. So don't feel free to talk to your personal tutor. They won't judge you for it, or will think that you're not good enough or something. That's the biggest takeaway, I think. Good. I think we'll move on to the next session and then talk about accommodation in general. There are several types of accommodation, which many of you asked about. There is university halls, which are mostly not catered, some are. And they're run by the universities, so King's, UCL, LSE. Then there are intercollegiate halls, where you live with students from all the University of London accommodations. They are all catered, or almost all. And then obviously there's private accommodation, which you just rent yourself. Or you stay at home and live with your parents. So we'll just answer your questions about each of those, and then go into some of the things to do when you arrive, and how to organize all of that. Shall we start with the university provided halls? We have a question here from Kavisha, who will be at UCL. What's the difference between halls and houses? Which one is better? And how many people did we share facilities with, and how did it work out?
So in terms of university-run accommodation, in my experience at UCL, houses and halls are the same thing. They're just the difference is just stemming from the fact that what the actual name of the accommodation is. So I lived in a hall called Francis Gardner House, and it was called House, but it was like any other UCL accommodation. It's literally just the title of the name, or what street it's on, or whatever. They're usually arranged in cluster flats. So what happens is you'll have 5 to 8 bedrooms sharing one kitchen, or I don't know. This kind of depends on the actual hall that you end up at, and it also depends on your floor and things like that. It varies, but basically you'll share a common area which will contain a kitchen, if it's an uncatered hall, and sometimes you'll have a little living room corner with a TV, but not all of them have that. But they'll have a big dining table and stuff, so enough space for everyone to hang out there comfortably. So some rooms will be ensuite and some won't be. If it's not ensuite, usually you'll have a sink at least in your room, so you can brush your teeth there and wash your hands and things like that. But you'll share showers and toilets with the other people who you share your kitchen with or with your floor, for example. The other thing is they can be co-ed or single sex. Sometimes they arrange it by floor, so they'll have like a girls' floor and a boys' floor, or they'll be completely mixed. Again, this completely depends where you end up. And you can kind of, I think you can give, with UCL how it works, you give preference what your single most important factor is, so whether that be cost or proximity to UCL. So I imagine it's probably similar for other universities in London as well. But you might be able to, I mean, you can read online about all of them, kind of what facilities they have, you know, what laundry facilities, what common rooms are available for everyone. Some even have like their own little library or study rooms at least, or computer lounges. So you can read about the facilities of those. And also you'll see obviously where they are, how new they are, how big, and then
How
you can
expensive.
decide based on what you prefer. Exactly, yeah. So that is one setup. So, and then some accommodations also offer studio spaces. So a studio will be where you have like, it's basically one big room with a bathroom in there. And then you also have like, so you'll have some sort of, you won't have a full kitchen there, but you can cook there. You'll have a stove and an oven and a sink and stuff like that. So it's kind of like a self-contained unit, and it's designed so that you can like cook, eat, sleep, and study like all in the same room, basically. So you won't have to share cooking facilities with anyone else. But
Okay.
those tend to be a bit rarer.
We just got a question about accommodation, if UCL is your insurance choice, and what's the probability that you'll still get halls in first year? What happens if you get into your insurance, which is UCL?
I'm not sure. I don't have any direct experience with that. I know they guarantee accommodation for all first years.
First choice, yeah, and if it's outside.
If it's your first choice. If not, then I don't know. I know that UCL is always tight on space because the student numbers are kind of exploding, and accommodation space is not, unfortunately. So there's a lot more demand than there is supply. So I would say, unfortunately, your chances are probably quite low. Having said that, though, you might not get UCL specific accommodation, but in London there's lots of other student halls that have basically, that feel the same because they're set up in the same way, but they're run by independent organizations. So there's you can Google this, but there's a few of them. There's Unite have a few. There's I think there's one called Nido. There's a bunch, and there's lots that are quite close to UCL as well.
Yeah, those tend to be a little bit more expensive, a lot more expensive.
They do, but they're
so
also
it depends.
like they tend to be
the facilities
a bit nicer than the
a lot better. So it really depends on your budget.
Yeah, some of them have their own gym in them and stuff. So I mean, you can have a look, and obviously you don't want to commit to one of those now, but it's just for you to know that there'll always be an option, basically, for, so even if you don't get into UCL ones, if it's your insurance, but you'll find somewhere to live for sure.
Yeah. So the second big option that you'll have, unless you're at Imperial, is intercollegiate halls. Most of them are catered, and we have a question from Celine from Malaysia, whether to go catered or self-catered. And I'll give you my personal view, because I lived at Connaught Hall, which is one of the intercollegiate ones, for 2 years, which is catered. You have a room with a sink, you share bathrooms, and you have a microwave and a fridge, but you don't have a kitchen at all. So you're reliant on catered. And for me, it was really good, because first you get to have breakfast and dinner with all the people. You can make new friends every day. Plus, On the plus side, there's also you don't have to clean up, and kitchens in a flat can sometimes be very messy depending on your housemates, so you don't have to fight over that. It also takes less time for you to prepare food and to cook. So in first year you have more time to socialize, which is a good thing because you need to make friends and get used to the city. Obviously, on the negative side, you can say it's canteen food and it's English canteen food that might not be the best quality because they have to save as well.
Yeah, also,
especially if you're kind of vegetarian or vegan, then your choices are severely limited because they usually have 3 choices and one of them will be vegetarian. If you don't like that, or it's going to be the same every day, that might be a negative point. Sorry, Sophie.
And also probably in terms of timing, if you don't really eat during the same hour every day, then this might not be for you. Well, for example, one day you want to eat at a different hour, or you get hungry earlier or later, or you want to cook yourself something in the middle of the night because you're working for the whole night. Just from personal experience, I've never been to catered halls. I've never actually lived in halls, but I always enjoyed having the possibility to cook whenever I want and what I actually feel like. If I have a craving to eat something, I have a full kitchen available to me 24/7, in which I can actually make or prepare wherever I want. So I think this is good and can also save you money on not having to order food if you're hungry but your catering is not there at the moment, or as Hannah said, maybe you don't really feel like eating whatever is there this day. So it is quite convenient if you're not very picky with food, but if you know you're quite picky, then it might not be the best option for you.
Exactly. And also look at what we'll come later to, the location, what is important for you. And then we have another question from Anna from Spain, who will be at King's, worrying about what if she doesn't get any accommodation that is close to campus. So we'll talk King's also guarantees you accommodation if you're from outside the M25 in your first year, but they have some accommodation, for example, in Stratford that is a little bit further out. So if you should get allocated a space there and don't want to take it, or if you just generally prefer private accommodation, that's obviously also something that you can do. Also coming back to the question about insurance choice, whether you get UCL accommodation or not, you can always get private accommodation. You know, London's so big, but there are definitely a few things that you should be looking out for when you want to rent something. So we had a question about whether you should go and, for example, go visit London and look at flats before you move there. I think for university accommodation, for intercollegiate halls, you don't need to do that because they're usually decent quality and you see the pictures, you can expect that's going to be alright. It's quite different for private accommodation. I would never move in somewhere where that I hadn't seen before. Maybe Kasia, from your experience, you can confirm.
Yeah, so basically, I mean, the only option in which I would actually do that is maybe you have trusted friends who are looking, for example, for my third year. I did not visit the place before moving in. However, I had friends over there looking for the accommodation that have kind of seen the flat and read the contract through. I have not seen my accommodation before I moved to London the first year because I could not afford LSE student accommodation. So I rented privately and I was in a triple room, which is fine, but actually calculating it, even though it was relatively close, I still overpaid because I sort of didn't know, I didn't compare many different things. Also, the people in the house changed quite a lot and there wasn't much, how to say, kind of stability. And it turned out that the person who was kind of managing the house or like paying to the landlord was cheating on us quite heavily, and he was later on put in jail. But you have to be careful not to become scammed. And in my first year, because usually when you rent privately, you get a year contract, which has its positives and negatives. In the sense, if you don't like the place, you cannot change because you're kind of bound by the contract. But in my first year, I rented. I found things on things like spare room, so they would be a bit more flexible because they would be rented directly from the landlord. However, if you don't do it through the agency, even though it might be cheaper and you're avoiding certain fees, there's a bit less security sometimes. Depends on your landlord. In my first year, I would move 3 times throughout the whole year because there were certain problems. For example, as I said, the first one, we were sort of cheated upon, and it was a triple room, and I found I need some private space. In the second accommodation, it was very far off in Tottenham, which is fine. However, for example, because it was rented by rooms, not all my flatmates were great, and they changed a lot as well. And there were quite a lot of house problems between the people because I did not live with students, for example, and or there was maybe one student at a time, and the other 4 or 5 people would be kind of working adults. One woman would be significantly older, so even when you had friends over, she might not be very happy, and there were quite a lot of problems. So you have to take all those things into account when you consider renting privately. Definitely consider the contract, what's included, how long in advance do you have to notify the person if you want to move out. There usually are options of quitting early a contract. However, usually we have to pay quite a bit. For example, pay for the remaining of the month. Or sometimes it's not even possible. Sometimes they can only do that if you find somebody to replace you. Another thing to consider with private accommodation, unfortunately, is, again, it's very good that you're in place in London, because you also might find it very difficult to actually find something that's good and reliable. If somebody offers you accommodation without having met you earlier, it might actually be quite suspicious, because in terms of good housing in London, it can be quite a competition. Precisely when I was looking for a flat with my friends for my last year, I think we were rejected from 5 or 6 houses before, because it's not that you see a house and you like the price and you say, yes, I want it. There are going to be other students who also want it, and the landlord, knowing that they're giving quite a good offer, will want to choose the ones that they like. So, for example, sometimes some students will offer more money. Some will simply seem in a way better, maybe quieter, maybe, I have no idea, but landlords do have certain, how to say this, requirements? Preferences, personal preferences in terms of who they like living there. You have another very important thing is the guarantor, especially if you're not EU or even not UK. Some landlords will require for you to have a UK guarantor, which is basically a person that can legally sign a document that if you do not provide rent that month, they are legally liable to pay for that. And they usually have to be UK based. In my second year, the landlord was okay with my parents in Poland signing that. But for example, for my last year, one of my flatmates who was UK, the father simply signed the agreement for everyone, for the whole flat. So it's kind of quite a lot of responsibility on his part, especially that he didn't know me. So you have to think about who can possibly be your guarantor, and do you have one, or if not, then you might have to find a landlord who's okay with having a overseas guarantor. So this is quite important. So whoever time when you're looking for a flat, usually at least 3 months in advance, I would say. So you could come over the summer. Maybe if you have friends, you could try and stay with them. Sometimes maybe it's quite difficult to find temporary accommodation as well while you're looking for the flat. However, again, I would definitely not recommend, unless it's student accommodation, renting a flat without seeing it before or being in London. So
Yeah.
long diversion, also discussed all the different issues while you look for a flat in the second and third year. There are more, and I bet Hannah and Sophia have other experiences as well. There are lots of things to consider, definitely. Cleanness, you have to look at the flat quite well, because a lot of them will have quite a lot of mold that you might not notice at first. And then, especially if you're very sickly, it may affect you quite badly later on. So those are those little things that you might want to look at when you consider flat searching.
Yeah, also some other little things to add. You usually have to pay a deposit, which is 1 to 2 months of rent. Make sure if you're renting privately, it's in a deposit protection scheme, which means that it's kind of protected, and then you can like claim it back. Because sometimes landlords, if you just transfer it to their account, they might not be willing to give it back if any problems arise, or because they know that you don't really have a legal claim on it. So just make sure that works out. And then Michelle from the UK asks whether she should live with her parents, or what the implications of living with your parents are, or moving out to some other accommodation. Several of my friends in London moved out for the first year and lived in halls, and then moved back in their second and third years because it was just so expensive to rent somewhere in London. I know others who stayed at home the whole time, which was perfectly fun as well. It might be a little bit more challenging to kind of get a social network if you have to catch a train early or something all the time. But you have to think about how much you save on renting something versus staying at home, and maybe a solution in the middle could be something for you, renting, kind of going into halls in the first year if you get an offer, and moving back in later. But there are definitely ways to socialize with, even if you live with your parents, that should not be a problem. You might have to do it a little bit differently by joining more societies versus hanging out with your flatmates. But everyone I know, it worked out really well for them. So I think you shouldn't worry about that. Do you have anything else for the tips about renting a place?
I think one tip is that you shouldn't really disregard living farther off, or maybe exploring districts that you didn't know or did not consider a good place to live. South, North London definitely has places that are quite close to maybe parks or different kind of social centers, maybe 1 or 2 stops away. And you can definitely rent cheaper if you consider maybe renting 1 or 2 stations away from your preferred area. Even if it's not central, maybe you would like to prefer to live in North London, but maybe instead of renting in the middle of Shoreditch, you might want to consider going into a less popular area that's still quite close, because you're definitely going to get better quality for money as well. So that's something to consider, because again, student accommodation has very small rooms. That's another reason why I never chose so, because I was offered a room that's the size of my desk at the moment for £200 a week, whereas farther off I could get a really big room with a double bed for £130 a week. So those are those things that you want to consider. What's more important for you? Have a think about what kind of lifestyle do you like to lead. If you are very, very social and you want to go out a lot, then maybe living more centrally might be better for you, and you might want to save up on transport. However, be closer to your friends, but maybe have a bit of a lower quality accommodation. If you value space and privacy, you might want to consider either paying a bit more on getting a studio, but farther off, or having a bigger room within a flat share. However, you will have to sort of pay extra for transport, and also kind of try to plan the transport time. When I was studying in London, there was no 24-hour tube. This has changed, so maybe you might want to consider trying to simply live along those lines that actually are going 24 hours, and it's not such a big problem anymore. Again, having just maybe being on a good line might be more important than the distance, because you might, for example, live relatively close but a bit too far to walk. But if you have to change 2 times, then it might take you actually much longer, because the tubes can get very, very crowded, especially during peak times. However, if you only have kind of one line connection, then you're definitely getting there faster. So those are definitely kind of things that you want to consider when choosing a place.
Yeah. So I think the first year options are the ones that we said. And many of you are worrying about second year accommodation because you've heard London is very difficult to find a place. So we have, for example, Anger from La Réunion asking how much it costs to live in central London. We also have several people worrying about flatmates for second year. Myra from Germany, who's going to be at UCL, or Lisa from Denmark, how to find something in second year, how to find people to live with in second year. Maybe Sophie, you can just give us a quick overview of your top tips for that.
Sure. I think in terms of second year, so there's a couple of things. You'll probably move out of, most people in their first year do end up in university halls, and lots of people find their future flatmates either in halls because they've lived with them on the same floor, or they met them at dinner, or that you might want to live with your course mates, or with people you've met in other societies or in uni in general. So it's usually just whoever are your kind of like your closest friends that you know you'll get along with well in a living situation as well. So in terms of like, best friends are not always the best flatmates. Like, that's the one thing to watch out for, I think. You kind of should compare whether your lifestyles are compatible in terms of, you might not want to live with your course mates because you'll see them in your course all the time anyway. So you might want to live with a different crowd of people, so you get like a bit more diversity. Or you might be a night owl and like be up and study at night all the time, and your other friend might get up at 9 a.m. every day to go for a run. And that might annoy you. So like just some things like that you should watch out for. If you want, like, if you value your personal space and your peace and quiet, and then your flatmate is a hardcore party goer who goes out like 3 times a week, then that might get annoying. Or if someone is really clean and someone's really dirty. So just like basic things like that. But otherwise, I would say don't worry about looking more than 2 to 3 months in advance, because not many things will be available anyway. Like the London property market moves quite fast, so there'll always be things available, but they'll also be taken up quite soon, so you have to act fast as well.
Yes, I would add one thing to that. You might want to, in terms of if not really searching actively, you might want to ask your friends from upper years a bit earlier, when are they going to move out? Because if you might actually get a flat or place before it actually goes to the market. The best place I've ever lived in was my second year. I managed to live in West Kensington for the same price as Tottenham or South London, because I was simply lucky enough to get the flat from a friend and didn't really go to the market. Unfortunately, the landlord, because it was rented directly, and he lived abroad and didn't really realize what are London prices. And he did, after 1 year, realize that he didn't get much more money for that. So I had to move out at the end of the year. But how I got it was basically through a friend that was moving out. So this is another thing to consider. But definitely if you're searching through websites, then 2 to 3 months. But you might want to earlier on ask some friends whether, especially if you know they have a really nice place, whether they might be moving out.
The other advantage of that method for looking for houses is also that you know what you get, because even if you go for a viewing, you don't know whether the oven works well or whether, the shower pressure is crap or stuff like that. You don't find out, that you only find out when you live somewhere, so you can get all like the details from the people who were at the house before you. It also means that you simply don't have the hassle of like house hunting, because house hunting is difficult. Like, it's quite like emotionally it'll be draining. I know that sounds stupid, but it's not a fun thing to do. But so you don't have to deal with landlords and agencies who are very pushy salespeople, and you should always keep that in the back of your mind when you deal with them, because they'll be incredibly friendly, but don't buy that. And the other thing is, you kind of avoid the whole hassle of house hunting itself. So and you also avoid agency fees. So if you look for an agency if they show you around somewhere, then they will usually want a commission if you do end up taking their flat. So oftentimes if you rent directly, you can avoid that. So that's always a good thing too.
So networking with all the students is always great for that. So that concludes the accommodation section. I hope we covered most of the points. We now have a few more questions on kind of social life and finding friends. What is life at accommodation like?
Okay.
I think Kasia has to be off to meet her supervisor.
Go, unfortunately. Well, maybe not meeting me yet, but I'm seeing him tomorrow, and I have to send him part of my dissertation. So I have to work on it a little bit. But it was nice to take part in the webinar, and I hope I answered some of your questions. I'm sure that Hannah and Sophie can talk a bit more about social life as well. So yeah, bye.
Good. So we have a question from Ango. We'll try to go through those quickly. What is life at accommodations like? We also have I'm asking, how can I blend into the new culture? The new educational system will be hard. And then a very fun question from Linjun from the US, who's going to be at LSE. What outfits are appropriate for London, especially the frequent rain? And other questions about what can you do in London, what clubs you can join, how to meet new people. So I'll just start with a few points. London is amazing because you can do everything. It just depends on how much money you have to do all those things. But there are a lot of free things to do as well. I'll start with university societies, which are a great way to meet people, to answer that question. There are hundreds of them, and there'll be a freshers fair, which you should go to, and where everyone has like a little stall, and you can sign up with your email address. You'll sign up to like 30 things, and they'll send you emails all year long. But make sure you go to a few things in the first few weeks, because they're good fun, and they usually do something that you'd like to do as well. So always part of the ukulele society, which was nice. I was also part of the investment banking society, where you get speakers and you get to know a little bit more about that. And that's how you meet like-minded people who are interested in something that you're interested in as well. So that's definitely one of the best points.
I met most of my friends basically through societies. That's like the one thing I've learned about university: join societies because you'll find friends. I don't know, for me that was the easiest way. I would suggest go for a mixture between academic societies. So like there'll usually be a society kind of for every program or course or department at least, which gives you kind of like more industry relevant stuff, and that might not be as relevant in like the first couple of years, but especially in your second and third year. In your first year it might be interesting, but it's more helpful in upper years when you start looking for jobs or think about what you want to do after uni. But you know, sports and sports societies are always good fun, or any other kind of just like fun society. So there's very obscure clubs always, like there's like a Harry Potter appreciation society. Yeah, there's lots of random stuff which is just fun, and you can also, if you can't find anything you like, what lots of people end up doing is they actually found their own societies at the end of second or first year even, and then run that. And also, if you get involved in a society, being on a committee can be a really good thing to put on your CV and give you great stuff to talk about in an interview, because it shows like great leadership and communication, which and like an example of teamwork. So I don't know, it's always very easy to talk about these experiences, and it's something that you don't have to work hard for. So it's always fun. So
yeah, it combines the social thing and the very useful thing as well. So
yeah,
that's
exactly.
time usually. Good. Then we have a question about Freshers Week. What's it like? Simon from the UK going to UCL is asking about that, how to make friends, how to handle workload and independence.
I mean, I think meeting people is get involved in uni life. So join societies, go to your lectures, talk to people who you sit next to. Even though there might be some huge courses, but just go up and talk to people. It's pretty much as simple as that.
Yeah. Also,
And
your
make
first
friends
year, yeah,
with as well. So like organize like flat dinners. If you're in halls or in a house or wherever your living situation is, you'll have people around you, like your flatmate. So just be friendly with them and suggest going for dinner or for drinks, or cook sometime. So it's a great way to get to know people.
yeah. And your first year, obviously you have to get used to the system and how it works in the UK, how it works at university, which might be very different from high school. But that is what first year is for. It would usually count maximum like 10% of your degree, or not at all. So you don't need to stress too much about university work. Just make sure you attend all the lectures, you hand in everything, you kind of put the work in, because that's how you learn how to do it in second year, third year. But make sure that you feel good about living in London and that you make friends, that you'll do all the things that Sophie suggested, because it makes a big difference whether you're just good at university but a little bit unhappy because you don't do that much socially, or if you do quite well and do lots of stuff that you really like doing. And then one question from Myra from Germany, who will be at UCL, is study abroad or special events. If you're doing a language, you'll usually go abroad in your third year, which is what I did. In lots of other degrees, you can choose to go abroad or apply to do either a semester or a year. And universities will usually let you know at the end of your first year or in the middle of your first year what options are available. Just make sure that you choose something that you like, that makes sense academically. And for me, it was a good experience. Another question that she's asking, should I bring a ball gown? Do you have a ball gown in London, Sophie?
Personally, I've never needed one, but I mean, if you want, you can find an opportunity to wear it for sure. There usually is balls, like at Christmas. There's always a couple of events. So whether that be through society, or my department always had a Christmas ball. But you don't necessarily need to wear a ball gown for that. So it's not really that strict.
Yeah, it's quite relaxed usually.
Yeah, for some of the but do bring some like formal clothes, especially if you start going to some like industry kind of networking stuff. If you want to meet like professionals, like you will need to look like business casual, but like you won't. I don't know. I don't think you need a ball gown.
Yeah.
But again, like there will be opportunities to wear it if you choose to.
And on the point of kind of career-oriented things, in the UK, especially in some industries like law, banking, it starts really early if you want to have an internship or work at those things, because usually you do a 3-year degree, and in your first year you can do something like a spring week or an insight event that you will also have to apply for, even though you haven't really started university yet. So it is good to go to those things if you think you could be interested, that you're really bright and good. They might just fast track you through the interview process, which is something that is not what I had on my mind in my first year at all. But if you want to try out something, have a look around in your first
also
year,
another point,
meet people.
This is one of the huge advantages about being in London, because you have the exposure to all of these great companies who are basically on your doorstep. And that is not the case in any other city in the whole of the UK, because basically, I mean, all of the industry and all of the jobs are kind of concentrated in the southeast. This is where everything is happening. So, and obviously London is the epicenter of that. So being in London is a huge advantage for that.
Yeah. So Magdalena is asking, is it hard to connect schedule with social life? For me, I think that worked. You have to get used to that. Make sure you keep on track with your university work, and then you have time to do social stuff. It's all about managing your time, and being efficient at working, and then take some time off to have some fun, to do sports. As a arts student, or I did languages, I didn't have that many lectures. I had probably 10 to 14 hours a week, which leaves you with plenty of time. It really helped me, for example, in first year that there was breakfast provided at halls, because that made me get up in the morning and start the day. But you'll find a way that works for you. And that's what first year is also for, just exploring how to organize yourself, kind of moving out of your parents' place probably, and living in London, which has everything to offer. So you need to kind of see what you most want to do. Good. I hope we covered most of the things you asked. If there are any last minute questions, let us know. I'll just have a few points, the vital information about moving to London in a short summary. One, it's expensive, but it has great opportunities. You have exposure to employers, you're doing industry, you have conferences, societies. You can also go to other university events, usually. So there's lots to do, lots of opportunities. And you're not confined to campus. You really have the whole city at your feet, with all the events that are going on in London that are not university specific. But it might be a little bit more challenging to really connect with other students because you might live far away from your friends. And in London, if you travel somewhere, it might be like half an hour to get to your friend's place, even though it's quite close, a few stations. But all in all, I think it's a great city to live in. I certainly enjoyed it, and it has amazing opportunities that I would never have expected before. Sophie, what
I can
is
second
your
that.
resume?
I ended up in London and I applied to 5 units in the UK, one of them being in London, the other 4 weren't. And the reason I applied to UCL was because of the program it offered, not because it was in London. And initially I had always wanted to go to a campus uni and not be in London because I found it too daunting. It's just a huge city and I thought I'd just find myself a bit lost there. In the end, I did pick UCL based on the course again. But actually, I have absolutely loved being in London. I'm going to stay there as well after I graduate. And it's kind of like it sounds so cheesy, but it's the best thing about uni, I think, personally for me at least.
Yeah.
And no, it's really awesome. So I would recommend it to anyone.
Good. Well, with those questions that we hopefully answered and ending on a very positive note, I'm sure you can all do this. I'm sure you will have an amazing time. If something doesn't go that well, make sure you ask people, ask for help, because it's always going to be available, whether it's through uni, through societies, friends. That is how London works. And best of luck with your degree. And we'll say goodbye.